People, I'd like to welcome you to this lecture I'm giving on this provocative and intriguing question. Is the God of the Old Testament truly a divine being? Or is he a construct created by men of the time to control the populace? This lecture will examine various aspects of the Old Testament, including its portrayal of God, the ethical implications of its laws, and the historical and literary context in which it was written. It will also explore the possibility that the God of the Old Testament is a human construct designed to serve specific socio-political purposes. Let's embark on this scholarly journey with an open mind, armed with historical evidence, archaeological findings, and literary analysis. First, I'd like to examine the nature of the God of the Old Testament, a bloodthirsty deity. One of the most striking characteristics of the Old Testament God is his depiction as a deity who demands blood sacrifices and enforces harsh laws. The narrative of the Old Testament are replete with instances of divine wrath, punishment, and calls for sacrifice. For example, in Leviticus 1, 3-5, we find detailed instructions on how to offer burnt offerings, which involve the slaughtering of animals. The story of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 22 further exemplifies the demand for blood sacrifice, where God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac only to stop him at the last moment. What does the demand for blood sacrifice in religious texts tell us about the society and the culture that produced these texts? Let's go in the historical context. These narratives must be understood in their historical and cultural context. In the ancient Near East, the practice of animal and human sacrifice was not uncommon. Many neighboring cultures, such as the Canaanites, the Moabites, practiced similar rituals. Thus, the Old Testament sacrificial system reflects broader ancient practices rather than a unique divine command. A scholar, Jonathan Clowens, notes in purity sacrifice in the temple, the sacrificial system was integral to the religious life of ancient Israel and served to maintain the sanctity of the community and its relationship with the divine. That's Clowens, Klawans, 2009. And let's take a look at this. How do cultural practices influence the development of religious rituals and beliefs? The origin of biblical laws borrowing from older traditions. Another crucial aspect in this discussion is the origin of the laws and ethical codes in the Old Testament. Many scholars argue that these laws were not unique to Israel, but borrowed from older traditions. For instance, the famous Ten Commandments bear a striking resemblance to the ethical codes found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Code of the Hammurabi. The parallels between these legal codes suggest a common cultural and legal heritage in ancient Near East, as noted by scholar William Hallow in Origins, the Ancient Near East Background of Some Modern Western Institutions. These shared legal traditions reflect the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations and their influence on Israel law. Hallow, Hallo, 1996. What are the implications of finding similarities between the laws of different ancient cultures? How does this affect our understanding of their origins? I conclude the Bible as nonsense, but lack of archaeological evidence. A contentious point in this debate is the claim that the Bible is complete nonsense, with no archaeological evidence to support its historical narratives. While some biblical stories lack direct archaeological corroboration, this does not necessarily invalidate the entire text. However, certain prominent figures and events, such as the Exodus and the conquest of Canaan, remain historically elusive. For example, the absence of evidence for a large-scale immigration of Israelites from Egypt and the lack of archaeological signs of a unified monarchy under David and Solomon have led some scholars like Israel Finkelstein, Neil Asher Silberman, to understand the Bible unearthed, to question the historical accuracy of these accounts. Finkelstein and Silberman, 2001. How do we assess the historical reliability of the text when direct archaeological evidence is lacking? The construct of the Old Testament God, control and socio-political utility. One plausible theory is that the God of the Old Testament was a construct created by the ancient Israelites to establish social order and control. The portrayal of God as a powerful, demanding deity who requires obedience and sacrifice could have been a means to enforce social cohesion and hierarchical structures. This view aligns with the concept of divine kingship, where the ruler authority is legitimized through a divine mandate. In what ways can religion be used as a tool for socio and political control? Think about it. Provide territorial spirit and racism. The depiction of God as a territorial spirit who chooses and favors one group of people, the Israelites, over others can be seen as a reflection of a tribal and territorial nature of ancient societies. This exclusivist view is evident in passages such as Deuteronomy 7:6, where God declares Israel to be his chosen people. Scholar Mark Smith, in The Early History of God, argues that this portrayal of Yahweh evolved from a local deity to a supreme God of Israel, reflecting the political and social dynamics of the time. Smith, 2002. Let's take a look here at the creation, the creation story and plagiarism, borrowing from Mesopotamian myths. Creation story Genesis shares significant similarities with older Mesopotamian myths, particularly the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish. These ancient texts predate the biblical accounts and contain parallel themes and motifs, such as the creation of humans from clay and the Great Flood narrative. The parallels between these stories suggest that the biblical authors drew on existing mythological traditions to craft their narratives. As Stephanie Daly discusses in Myths from Mesopotamia, Creation, the Flood, Gilgamesh, and others, these shared stories indicate a cultural exchange and adaptation of mythological themes across ancient Near East. Daly, 1989. Moses, let's check him out. A fictional character, patterned after Sargon of Akkad. The figure of Moses is, as depicted in the Old Testament, shares remarkable similarities with the legend of Sargon of Akkad, a prominent Mesopotamian ruler. Both stories involve a child set adrift in a basket on a river who subsequently rescued and rises to a position of leadership. This narrative motif suggests that the story of Moses may have been patterned after existing legends to lend historical credibility and heroic status to the Israelite leader. Let's go back to the blood and human sacrifices and the ethical implications. The practice of blood sacrifice, particularly the notion of human sacrifice as found in some biblical narratives, raises significant ethical concerns. The story of Jephthah in Judges chapter 11, where he vows to sacrifice the first thing that comes out of his house if he wins the battle, resulting in the sacrifice of his daughter, exemplifies this disturbing theme. Such narratives have led scholars like Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion to criticize the moral framework of the Old Testament, viewing it as a reflective, primitive, and violent culture. Dawkins, 2006. What ethical challenges arise from ancient practices of blood and human sacrifice? How do the modern interpretations address these issues? Well, in conclusion, the portrayal of the God of the Old Testament is complex and multifaceted, blending divine characteristics with human socio-political constructs. The evidence suggests that the God of the Old Testament may indeed have been a construct created by ancient Israelites to control and unify their society, reflecting the cultural and historical context of the time. The ethical and theological implications of this portrayal continue to provoke debate and discussion, inviting us to critically examine the nature of religious narratives and their impact on human history. How can we approach the study of ancient religious texts in that way that respects both their historical context and their lasting influence on contemporary beliefs? I will leave references to this lecture, this discussion, in the description of this video. But as far as me, I think the Bible is a complete construct. I think it's a compilation of old stories. I think the New Testament was written to combat Marcion. I think that the birth of Jesus we couldn't know. I cannot see, and if you would like to discuss this further, I invite you to come on the show and we will have a debate or a discussion about this. I know Christians will be, I believe that Judaism is a construct, and I cannot find any further references to prove me wrong. So in my research, my academic research over a period of 30 years or better, this stands true to me, that it's completely manufactured, completely made up. It is no more historical than nothing. The God of the Old Testament is a savage beast. He takes virgins, his spoils of war, He doesn't even act like a god. He puts a bunch of rules on people, and if they don't follow the rules, he tries to torture them or harm them. That is wrong on every level. He cannot be a God of love because he doesn't know what love is. All he knows is obedience. That's it. And dualistic nature, invention of Satan. I'll get into that next. But thank you for tuning in to Wise as a Serpent. And always remember to critically think. Do not take people at their face value. Just critically think. The pastor of your church, your parents, anyone. You must critically think. They were taught one thing and one thing to believe. You must be wise as a serpent today. Thank you.